Joining me now is Daniel Levy, president of the U.S. Middle East Project. Thanks so much for being here with us. So I just want to start with your reaction to the unprecedented events we're seeing right now.
Well, I think the first thing to note, Kim, of course, is this element of surprise and the really staggering success in that respect by the Palestinian movements who've launched this military effort. I think that will, over time, play very badly in Israel. I think there was a sense of hubris that you could keep the Palestinians in these conditions and not have these kinds of resistance actions. I think the immediate thing is that the Israeli Jewish community, the political parties, the representatives come around, unify. But I think ultimately this will play into an already deep polarization inside Israel. I think this, whatever happens next, will be considered a significant success for those Palestinian movements. It's not clear what happens next. It would be surprising if the Israeli response in Gaza did not also include a ground operation. I think this comes at a time where we have the most extreme government in Israel, endless provocations. You also have what feels like a quite fragile and weak internal Israeli environment. And I think the Palestinian side have looked at that, those Palestinian movements who've launched this. They've looked at the situation in Jerusalem, that resonates not only with Palestinians, but far beyond. They've looked at issues like how Palestinian prisoners have been treated. They've looked at the normalization talks, and this has been the response. And I think it's also an important reminder, as your viewers are realizing this morning, that really the issue in the Middle East isn't whether Israel and Saudi Arabia, who are not at war with each other, normalize or not. The issue is what happens on the Palestinian front. So many decades of occupation, there will not be security, quiet and stability as long as the Palestinians don't have their rights and their freedoms. And we've been reminded of this. It also comes on the 50th anniversary of the last time Israeli intelligence had a huge failure, which was the 1973 war with Egypt, the Yom Kippur War. And so I think that will play into the Israeli psyche and into the analysis you're seeing coming out of Israel this morning and in the coming days.
So in these attacks, we know Israelis have been, at least one has been killed, many injured, some possibly kidnapped. We're still looking into those reports. But when we look at the Israeli response, especially if we might see a ground operation is in Gaza, often we see, innocent Palestinian civilians losing their homes, sometimes losing their lives. What will the cost be here, do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to point that out. I think the variable that may be most significant in the Israeli side of the equation from what you've just mentioned is whether there are indeed live Israelis who have been taken prisoner in Gaza, which also impacts what kind of reaction Israel can undertake. Let's remember the basic dynamics here. Gaza, home to over 2 million Palestinians, many of whom were driven out of Israel in 1948 in the Nakba, who are refugees, the majority of whom are refugees, living for decades now, coming on to 2 decades, in what is essentially a blockade, a siege, an open-air prison. We have seen several iterations during that time of disproportionate strikes by Israel, waves of Israel, of course, has the sophisticated weaponry. And what we've seen on so many occasions is devastation, massive civilian loss, of course, massive loss to housing, to infrastructure, to schools on the Palestinian side. And unfortunately, we can expect that again. But daily life for Palestinians in Gaza and indeed throughout the areas controlled by Israel is one that is not normal. So Israelis are waking up to a very abnormal situation, but it's an abnormality that Palestinians live with all the time. It's just a question of what is the extremity of that. And the other thing to look out for, of course, in May of 2021, when there was the last major escalation, you saw what the Palestinians have called the Unity Intifada, and you saw popular expressions of opposition to Israel inside Israel, on the streets of Israel, in mixed towns. You saw it inside the West Bank. And so I think one of the real questions is whether we will see that again during the coming days.
Yeah, so much still unknown. It's, of course, early morning still here on the U.S. East Coast. We haven't heard yet from the Biden administration on this. What do you think the U.S. response will be or should be?
I fear there is a significant gulf between the answer to those two questions,
Right.
Kim, the what it will be and what it should be. I think what it will be is predictable, which will be standing in solidarity with Israel, recognizing what they will call Israel's right to defend itself, never recognizing the Palestinian right to resist an illegal occupation and a permanent siege and blockade. So I think that's one thing we'll see. The other thing that will be missing is an appreciation that you cannot keep people under permanent conditions of inhumane, immoral, but also illegal occupation and not expect something like this, not expect there to be insecurity for the party that is doing that to the Palestinians. And I think the rest of the world may look at this and may look at the inadequate American response and say, wait a minute, in one place you celebrate resistance. You celebrate people taking up arms against an invasion which is correctly considered to be illegal. That's in Ukraine. And in this other place, you run cover for the people who are doing the illegal occupation. And I think, in the parts of the world that have woken up already, and some that are also yet to wake up, they will see this as another example of the very selective American application of the standards it is claiming to uphold in one place and totally negates and undermines in another place.
Yeah, I'm not sure the parallels are quite equivalent, but I do take your point. But we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Daniel Levy. Really appreciate your perspective on this.
Thank you, Kim.